One theme that Dr. Gee has shared with us in his article, The Use of the Daily Temple Liturgy in the Book of the Dead. Now this is in the Totenbuchforschungen for 2006. One thing Dr. Gee has noted is that the Egyptians knew that the Egyptian Book of the Dead translated out as going forth by day. One of the technical terms, this ignores the use of peret, which is a technical term for the rising of a heavenly body and for a temple procession. It's very interesting that in our modern translations, we called it first the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and that was wrong. That was Richard Lepsius's original description of this literature, and it's not a Book of the Dead at all. And then another translation is the going forth by day, but this also ignores some technical terminology of the Egyptian terms that has to do with an astronomical body or the daily temple liturgy. It's fascinating how we're still not getting there. We're getting there, but we're still not there yet. New information is out now. And it is the temple ritual in the Book of the Dead that John Gee focuses on in these articles. And the use of the so-called funerary aspect of this is extremely interesting because the living have used the Egyptian Book of the Dead now for centuries. For decades, anyway, we've known about it. Back in 1910, Herman Juncker first noted that many pyramid texts and chapters from the Book of the Dead, chapters 26, 29, 125, 137, 148, 172, chapter 178, and chapter 180, were used as ritual texts in the temple at Dendera. And the funerary texts were used by the living was noted as early as 1960, when Walter Federn argued that the transformation texts in the coffin texts, and there's many dozens of these. So this isn't only consigned to the Book of the Dead, but it's also understood in the pyramid texts, the coffin texts, and on up into the Book of Breathings. All of this ancient Egyptian funerary material may have been temple material for the living. Walter Federn noted in 1960, explicitly chapter 17, 21, 78, and chapter 76 through chapter 88, these were used by the living as part of their initiations. And then in 1967, 7 years after Federn, Reinhold Merkelbach published a Greek papyrus which used part of the Book of the Dead 125 as part of the initiation of a Stolistes priest. The next year, 1968, Bridget Altenmuller-Kesting showed that passages from the pyramid texts were used in the purification rites of the kings in a variety of temple settings. Reinhard Grieshammer showed in 1972 that the Book of the Dead 125 was utilized in the gateways of the temple to imitate or initiate the priests into the temple. And so it goes, and he points out several other Egyptologists in 1978, in 1981. They used coffin texts 222 and 691 and chapters 22, 42, 59, and 71 from the Book of the Dead that were used additionally in the temples, not just for the funerals. Other articles by Irmtraut Munro were published in Amulet Papyrus that contained several chapters of the Book of the Dead, 89, 100, 129, 155, 157, 162. This demonstrated that they were texts that were used for amulets, used by the living, not by the dead. And so it goes. Numerous, dozens of chapters from all of the ancient Egyptian literature, it didn't matter which corpus we were looking at, the Egyptologists have now said, we have a new way of looking at this. And they've been trying to say this now for decades, but we're just not listening. John Gee updates us on this. Now, Dr. Gee does mention several chapters from the Egyptian books of the dead that describe one who knows this book on earth, or in the writing on the coffin. I mean, that's in the very first chapter of the Book of the Dead. And he's indicating that this shows that this is used for the living, not the dead, as such. So it's important to recognize that Book of the Dead 17, Book of the Dead 18, Book of the Dead 18 says, "And everyone upon whom this is recited, he prospers on earth." This is critical to understand. These are chapters being used specifically to the benefit of the individual while he is still alive before he or she dies. This is critical to understand in the Book of the Dead. And it's several chapters, 70, 71, 72, 20, 162, 165, Book of the Dead 19. Says, "The time given in the text implies the use in the morning by the living. Say it for yourself in the morning. It is a great protection." This is what the living is supposed to recite, is these chapters of the Book of the Dead while they're alive. It's a fascinating new analysis, again, a reassessment of the literatures. Now we have to go back through all of the literature and reread it with this theme in mind. This changes everything. According to the critics, the Book of Abraham is nothing. The papyri that the Joseph Smith Book of Breathings is nothing but chapters of the Book of the Dead. It's nothing but funerary literature. Well, it may not be that at all now. Now that the literature is being reread, we're seeing how there's much of the literature that the living are reciting instead of simply burying with the dead for use in the afterlife. It's for use in this life, here and now. Book of the Dead 125, 128, 133, 136, 140, 148, 151, 190. Dr. Gee goes through several different Books of the Dead chapters that discuss the use of the literature for the living. The chapter 1 is to be recited on earth. Chapter 15 is in the temple hymn to Re. Chapter 17 is to be recited on earth. Chapter 18 is to prosper on earth and escape fire. When they say on earth, that means while they are alive in this life. There is offering tables, there is initiation, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89 is all about initiation. Numerous chapters, 100, 110 is a temple text, 125 is an initiation, 128 is about the Wag festival. There are numerous entrances into the temple, 149. The 151 is about entering the gates, so on and so forth. So this information, he sums up in a statistical analysis of all of the 192 chapters of the Book of the Dead. This is so interesting because he says 55 of them, or 29% of the Book of the Dead, are known to have been used by the living. So with that kind of a statistic, we can see we have to reassess everything. And in the course of reassessing the use of the Book of the Dead for the living, this is not to deny that it is also used for the dead. It's not an either-or exclusive situation here. And he says that on page 81 of his study. Then he goes on to describe other chapters of the Book of the Dead and how they are actually using the lamp divination initiation ritual in the temple, and the point of that lamp ritual, as I've already noted, is to see the god. He sits himself at the feet of the gods and sees them using this lamp to bring them into focus. It is so interesting. And he declares he is pure. Now, the practice of lighting a lamp for the deceased did not originate in the New Kingdom. It's attested as far back as the Old Kingdom. So this is an old ritual. This is an old initiation that they used for millennia. The Middle Kingdom official, and the Middle Kingdom official leaves behind a totem liturgy, a liturgy for the dead, of course. It's contracted with the personnel of Wepwawet. The lighting of a lamp for Wepwawet, like what they do so that they might glorify their own officials on the day of the shining of the lamp in the temple. So they're doing this while they're alive. And this is directly tied with the hypocephalus, facsimile number 2, in the Book of Abraham, interestingly enough.